The autumn wind whispered through the cottonwoods as Marcus Sullivan carried the unconscious Apache girl into his ranch house, her small form weighing no more than a sack of grain in his arms. Dr. Samuel Harrison followed close behind, his medical bag clutched tightly as he surveyed the child's condition with worried eyes. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, with long black hair matted with dust and dried blood. Her traditional dress torn and stained from whatever ordeal had brought her to Marcus's doorstep. "Found her collapsed by the creek this morning," Marcus explained as he gently placed the girl on his bed. "Horse tracks everywhere. Looked like she'd been running for days." Dr. Harrison began his examination with practiced efficiency, checking for broken bones and serious injuries. "She's severely dehydrated and exhausted, but I don't see any life-threatening wounds. Mostly cuts and bruises. What I'm more concerned about is this." He gestured to the girl's face, noting the vacant stare that seemed to look through them rather than at them. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, though something in his gut already knew the answer. "I've seen this before, Marcus, in children who've witnessed terrible things. The mind sometimes protects itself by withdrawing. She may not speak for some time, if at all." Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest, the same hollow feeling that had plagued him since losing his wife Emma and their unborn child 3 years ago in a typhoid outbreak. He had retreated to this remote ranch seeking solitude, but looking at this broken child, he felt something stir that he thought had died with his family. Dr. Harrison worked quietly, cleaning the girl's wounds and checking her vital signs. "Her people call her Aiyana," he said softly, having recognized some of the beadwork on her dress. "It means eternal blossom in Apache. I treated some of the families from her band last winter, peaceful folks who traded fairly with the settlements." "Where are they now?" Marcus asked, though he feared he already knew. "Raiders hit their winter camp 4 days ago." Dr. Harrison's voice was heavy with sorrow. "Military patrol found the remains yesterday. She's likely the only survivor." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. This child had lost everything: her family, her home, her entire world, just as he had, but in a way so much more brutal and sudden that it made his own grief seem manageable by comparison. For 3 days, Aiyana lay in Marcus's bed, accepting water when it was pressed to her lips, but eating nothing solid. She stared at the ceiling with those dark, haunted eyes, unblinking, unseeing, lost in whatever terrible memories played behind them. Marcus slept in a chair beside the bed, watching over her like a guardian angel, speaking softly about anything. He could think of the weather, his horses, stories Emma used to tell him about her childhood. "The horses are restless today," he would say, maintaining a gentle, steady voice. "Especially Thunder, my stallion. He's black as midnight with a white star on his forehead. Emma always said he had the wildest mane she'd ever seen, like Storm." Clouds before a downpour. On the 3rd night, Aiyana finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper in the darkness. "Horses know," she said in accented English, startling Marcus from his doze in the chair. "What do they know, little one?" Marcus asked gently, afraid to move too quickly and break the fragile connection. "They know when hearts are broken," Aiyana replied, her eyes still fixed on the ceiling. "My grandfather taught me. Horses feel what we feel." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man." "He died first," Aiyana said with devastating simplicity. "He tried to protect the children. They shot him down like a wolf." The next morning, Marcus found Aiyana standing at the window, looking out at the corral where his horses grazed peacefully in the morning sun. She had eaten a few bites of the bread and honey he'd left beside her bed, the first food she'd taken since arriving. "Would you like to meet them?" Marcus asked carefully. "The horses?" Aiyana turned to look at him for the first time since she'd arrived, her dark eyes studying his face as if trying to determine whether he could be trusted. Finally, she nodded almost imperceptibly. Marcus led her slowly outside, noting how she moved like a shadow, silent and careful, her eyes constantly scanning for threats in the corral. His 6 horses lifted their heads at their approach, ears pricked forward with interest. "That's Thunder," Marcus said, pointing to the magnificent black stallion who dominated the small herd. "And there's Willow, my paint mare. She's gentle as a lamb." the bay gelding is copper, and the gray is storm, the two chestnuts are star, and comet their brothers. Aiyana said nothing, but Marcus noticed her breathing had become deeper, more relaxed. She moved closer to the fence, and Thunder, as if sensing something special about this small human, approached cautiously. "He likes you," Marcus observed as the stallion extended his neck toward Aiyana, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. "His mane," Aiyana whispered, reaching through the fence to touch Thunder's forelock. "It's tangled with sorrow." Marcus looked at Thunder's mane, which had indeed grown long and unkempt since Emma's death. He'd been so lost in his own grief that he'd neglected many of the small care rituals that had once been second nature. "Would you like to help me brush it?" Marcus offered, though he wasn't sure why. Something in Aiyana's expression when she looked at Thunder suggested a connection he didn't fully understand. Aiyana shook her head quickly, stepping back from the fence. "I cannot." "Why not?" "I am broken," she said simply. "I break everything I touch now." Marcus knelt down so he was at eye level with the girl, his heart breaking for her pain. "Aiyana, you're not broken, you're hurt, and that's different. Hurt things can heal." But Aiyana had already retreated, both physically and emotionally, wrapping her arms around herself and refusing to meet his eyes that evening. As Marcus sat on his porch watching the sunset, he noticed Aiyana standing at her bedroom window, staring out at the horses. Thunder stood near the fence closest to the house, as if he too was watching the girl. Over the following days, a pattern emerged. Aiyana would eat small amounts of food, but only when Marcus wasn't watching directly. She would stand at the window for hours observing the horses, but refused to go outside again. At night, she would wake screaming from nightmares, and Marcus would sit beside her bed, speaking softly until the terror passed. Dr. Harrison visited twice more, concerned about Aiyana's lack of progress. "She needs something to connect to," he told Marcus privately, "something that makes her want to heal." "I've tried everything I can think of," Marcus replied, frustration and worry evident in his voice. "She watches the horses, but she won't get close to them. She won't talk about her family or her past. I don't know how to reach her. Give her time." Dr. Harrison advised, "And keep doing what you're doing. Sometimes healing happens in ways we don't expect." That night, as Marcus dozed in his chair beside Aiyana's bed, he was awakened by a soft sound. Opening his eyes, he saw that Aiyana was sitting up, looking out the window at the moonlit corral. Thunder stood alone near the fence, his dark coat silvered by the moonlight. "He's waiting," Aiyana whispered. "Waiting for what?" Marcus asked softly. "For someone to understand his pain," she replied. "Animals know when someone else carries the same sadness they do." Marcus studied the girl's profile in the moonlight, seeing something in her expression that hadn't been there before, a flicker of recognition, of kinship. "Maybe," he said carefully. "He's waiting for someone who understands pain to help him heal too." Aiyana turned to look at Marcus, her dark eyes searching his face. Do you think broken things can help fix each other?" "I think," Marcus said gently, "that sometimes the only way to heal is to help someone else heal first." For the first time since she'd arrived, Aiyana smiled, just a tiny curve of her lips, but it was the most beautiful thing Marcus had seen in years. The next morning, when Marcus woke in his chair, he found that Aiyana was gone from her bed. Panic seized him until he looked out the window and saw her standing at the corral fence, her small hand extended toward Thunder's great head. The stallion stood perfectly still, allowing her to touch his face while she whispered something in Apache that Marcus couldn't understand. Whatever she was saying, Thunder seemed to understand it perfectly. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories from the Old West. Aiyana has taken her first step toward healing, but her journey with Marcus and Thunder is just beginning. What happens when this broken child finds the courage to trust again? Find out in the next chapter. 2 weeks had passed since Aiyana first touched Thunder's nose, and Marcus had watched with growing wonder as a slow transformation began to unfold. Each morning, the Apache girl would stand at the corral fence for longer periods, sometimes humming soft melodies that seemed to calm not just the horses, but something deep within herself. She still rarely spoke, and when she did, It was usually to ask about the horses or to murmur gentle words in Apache. That Thunder seemed to understand perfectly. She's different when she's with them. Dr. Harrison observed during one of his visits, watching from the porch as Aiyana stood motionless beside the fence, while all 6 horses grazed peacefully nearby. It's like she remembers who she used to be. Marcus nodded, sipping his coffee as he to watch the girl. Her grandfather must have taught her about horses. She knows things about them that I've never seen before. Yesterday, she told me that Willow was going to be lame before I noticed anything wrong. Sure enough, found a stone in her hoof that afternoon. The Apache have always had a special relationship with horses. Dr. Harrison mused. They believe horses can see into human souls, understand things about us that we don't even understand ourselves. That afternoon, Marcus was repairing a section of fence when he heard Aiyana's voice, stronger and clearer than he'd heard it since her arrival. She was standing at the corral, speaking to Thunder in a mixture of Apache and English. "Your mane tells stories," she was saying, her small fingers reaching through the fence to touch the stallion's tangled forelock. "Stories of loneliness, of missing someone. My grandmother taught me that a horse's mane holds their spirit, and when it's tangled, their spirit is tangled too." Thunder stood perfectly still, his dark eyes focused on the girl with an intensity that made Marcus pause in his work. "But I cannot fix it," Aiyana continued, her voice growing sad. "I am too broken to fix anything beautiful." Marcus set down his hammer and approached slowly, not wanting to startle either the girl or the horse. "Aiyana," he said gently, "what did your grandmother teach you about fixing tangled spirits?" Aiyana looked up at him, her dark eyes swimming with tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed since her arrival. "She said you have to sing the sadness out first. Let it go into the wind. Then you can braid new hope into their mane, pattern by pattern, until their spirit remembers how to be strong again." "That sounds like powerful medicine," Marcus said seriously. "Do you remember the songs?" "Yes," Aiyana whispered. "But if I sing them, I'll remember everything, all the voices that will never sing again." Marcus felt his heart break for this child who was trying so hard to protect herself from her own grief. He knelt down beside her, bringing himself to her eye level. "Aiyana, I lost my wife and our baby 3 years ago," he said quietly. "For a long time, I thought if I didn't think about them, didn't talk about them, it would hurt less. But all it did was make me feel empty inside, like I was only half alive." Aiyana studied his face with those wise, dark eyes. "What changed?" "You," Marcus said simply. "Watching you be so brave, seeing how you're fighting to heal even when it's hard. It reminded me that avoiding the pain doesn't make it go away. It just makes us smaller." Thunder nickered softly, as if agreeing, and both Marcus and Aiyana looked up at the great horse. His mane stirred in the afternoon breeze, and Marcus could see what Aiyana meant about it looking tangled with sorrow. "Maybe," Marcus continued carefully, "Thunder needs those songs as much as you need to sing them. Maybe helping him heal could help you heal too." Aiyana was quiet for a long moment, her small hand resting on the fence rail. Finally, she looked up at Marcus with an expression that held both terror and hope. "Will you stay with me?" she asked. "While I sing, in case the sadness becomes too big." "I'll stay right here," Marcus promised, "for as long as you need." Aiyana nodded slowly, then turned back to Thunder. The stallion had moved closer to the fence, his great head lowered so that his forelock nearly touched the girl's outstretched hand. "I need to be closer," Aiyana said. "To really help him, I need to touch his mane." Marcus hesitated. Thunder was gentle, but he was still a powerful animal, and Aiyana was so small. But looking at the connection between the girl and the horse, he realized that some kinds of healing required risk. "All right," he said, opening the gate. "But slowly, and I stay with you." Aiyana stepped into the corral with the careful reverence of someone entering a sacred space. Thunder stood perfectly still as she approached, his ears pricked forward, his breathing slow and steady. When she reached his side, Aiyana placed her small hand on his neck, just below his mane. She whispered in Apache, and Thunder's eyes half closed in what looked like contentment. Then Aiyana began to sing. The melody that emerged from her small throat was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard, ancient and haunting, filled with both profound sadness and incredible beauty. The other horses in the corral moved closer, drawn by the sound, while Thunder remained motionless, as if understanding that this moment was meant for him. As she sang, Aiyana began to work her fingers through Thunder's tangled mane, starting at the top and slowly, patiently working through each knot. The song seemed to give her strength, and tears streamed down her face as her voice grew stronger, more confident. Marcus found himself weeping as well, though he didn't understand the words. The emotion in Aiyana's voice was universal: grief for what was lost, love for what remained, and hope for what might still be possible. When the first song ended, Aiyana paused, her breathing deep and shaky. Thunder turned his great head to look at her, and Marcus could swear he saw understanding in the stallion's dark eyes. "Another song now," Aiyana whispered, beginning to separate Thunder's mane into sections. "This one is for new beginnings." The second song was different still, sad, but with an underlying current of strength and resilience. As she sang, Aiyana began to braid Thunder's mane with movements that were clearly practiced, her small fingers working with the kind of skill that spoke of years of teaching from loving hands. "My grandmother taught me," she said during a pause. In her singing, as if reading Marcus's thoughts, she said, "Every braid tells a story. This pattern is for courage." She pointed to a complex weave she was creating. "This one is for remembering those we love. And this one," she began a new section, "this one is for hope in tomorrow." For over an hour, Aiyana worked and sang, transforming Thunder's wild mane into an intricate work of art that seemed to capture the very essence of Apache culture and tradition. With each completed braid, both the girl and the horse seemed to grow calmer, more centered. When she finally finished, Thunder's mane hung in dozens of beautiful braids, each one telling a story of loss transformed into something beautiful. Aiyana stepped back to admire her work, and Thunder shook his head gently, the braids catching the late afternoon light. "He looks magnificent," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "He looks healed," Aiyana replied, and for the first time since her arrival, her smile was genuine and full of joy. That evening, Aiyana ate a full meal for the first time, and when Marcus tucked her into bed, she looked up at him with eyes that were no longer empty. "Marcus," she said, using his name for the first time, "tomorrow, can I braid the other horses too? I think they all have stories that need telling. I think that would be wonderful." Marcus replied, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "And Aiyana, your grandmother would be very proud of you today." Aiyana's smile was radiant. I think she was watching. I could feel her hands guiding mine when I made the braids for remembering. As Marcus settled into his chair for the night, he looked out at the corral where Thunder stood guard over the other horses, his braided mane gleaming in the moonlight, like a work of art. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt something he had thought lost forever: hope. The healing had begun, and it was more beautiful than anything he could have imagined. Subscribe to our channel to see how Aiyana's gift continues to transform not just the horses, but Marcus himself. The power of connection and tradition is working its magic. But what challenges still lie ahead for this unlikely family? Don't miss the next chapter. Spring had arrived at Marcus Sullivan's ranch, bringing with it wildflowers that painted the meadows in brilliant colors, and a transformation in Aiyana that was nothing short of miraculous. The silent, broken child who had arrived 6 months ago had blossomed into a vibrant young girl whose laughter now echoed across the valley. Every horse on the ranch bore the intricate braids that had become her signature, each animal carrying stories of courage, remembrance, and hope woven into their manes. But it was more than just the horses that had changed. Marcus himself had found healing in watching Aiyana reclaim her heritage and share it with such generous spirit. Her presence had awakened something in him that he thought had died with Emma: the capacity for joy, for family, for believing in tomorrow. "Marcus," Aiyana called from the corral where she was working with a new horse that had arrived the week before. "Luna is ready for her story braids, but she wants to tell me something first." Marcus smiled as he approached, still amazed by Aiyana's intuitive connection with the animals. Luna was a wild Mustang mare that he'd rescued from a group of horse breakers who had given up on her after she'd thrown every rider who'd tried to mount her. But Aiyana had seen something in the mare's fierce eyes that reminded her of her own journey from wildness to trust. "What is Luna telling you?" Marcus asked. Settling onto the fence rail to watch, Aiyana pressed her forehead against the mare's neck. Her eyes closed in concentration. "She says there are riders coming, 3 of them, and they carry the smell of authority and trouble." Marcus looked toward the horizon, and sure enough, 3 horsemen were approaching at a steady pace. As they drew closer, he recognized the lead rider as Agent William Crawford from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, a man whose reputation for removing Indian children from white families was well known throughout the territory. "Aiyana," Marcus said quietly, trying to keep the worry out of his voice, "go into the house and stay there until I call for you." But Aiyana had already recognized the nature of the threat. Her face had gone pale, and her hands trembled as she stepped away from Luna. "They've come for me, haven't they, to take me to one of those schools where they make Apache children forget who they are?" Marcus jumped down from the fence and put his hands on Aiyana's shoulders, looking directly into her frightened eyes. "Listen to me, little one. You are my daughter now. In every way that matters, I won't let anyone take you away from your home." "But the law," Aiyana began. "The law isn't always right," Marcus said firmly. "But love is. And I love you, Aiyana. This is your family now." The 3 riders entered the yard with official bearing, their badges glinting in the afternoon sun. Agent Crawford was a thin man with cold eyes and the kind of rigid posture that spoke of someone who valued rules over humanity. "Mr. Sullivan," Crawford said without dismounting. "I'm Agent Crawford from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I understand you're harboring an Apache child." "I'm raising my daughter," Marcus replied evenly, stepping protectively in front of Aiyana. "The child is not legally your daughter," Crawford said, consulting a document from his saddlebag. "She's a ward of the federal government, and as such, she belongs in an educational facility where she can be properly civilized." "She's perfectly civilized right here," Marcus said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "She's learning to read and write, she's healthy and happy, and she's preserving the cultural knowledge of her people. What more could your schools offer?" "Her proper moral instruction," Crawford replied coldly. "Training in Christian values and American customs. The ability to function in civilized society rather than clinging to savage traditions." Aiyana stepped out from behind Marcus, her chin raised with the same dignity her grandfather had shown in the face of impossible odds. "My traditions are not savage," she said clearly. "They teach respect for all living things, care for those who cannot care for themselves, and the importance of remembering those who came before us." "How are these things different from what you call Christian values?" Crawford's expression hardened. "This is exactly the kind of defiant attitude that our schools are designed to correct. The child will come with us now. The child will stay exactly where she is," came a voice from behind them. Dr. Harrison approached on horseback, followed by Sheriff Tom Bradley and a group of local ranchers that Marcus recognized as his neighbors. "Dr. Harrison," Crawford said, clearly annoyed by the interruption, "this is federal business. Local authorities have no jurisdiction here." "Perhaps not," Dr. Harrison replied calmly, "but local citizens have the right to know when someone is trying to tear apart a family in their community." Sheriff Bradley dismounted and approached Crawford with the kind of steady confidence that came from years of maintaining order in a lawless territory. "Agent Crawford, I've been observing Mr. Sullivan's care of this child for months now. She's healthy, educated, and well cared for. On what grounds are you claiming she'd be better off in a government institution?" "The law is clear," Crawford insisted. "Indian children must be placed in approved educational facilities for their own good." "Who's good?" asked Frank Morrison, one of the neighboring ranchers. "That little girl has taught my daughter more about kindness and respect in 6 months than most folks learn in a lifetime. She saved my horse when he was colicking," added Jim Torres. "Knew exactly what to do when even the veterinarian was stumped. That's the kind of knowledge we should be preserving, not destroying." Crawford looked around at the growing crowd of supporters with obvious frustration. "You don't understand the bigger picture. These traditional ways are holding back progress." "Progress toward what?" Aiyana asked, her voice carrying a wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. Progress toward a world where children are stolen from the only family they have left. Progress toward forgetting the songs that heal broken spirits. Progress toward believing that love and care matter less than rules written by people who never met the children they're meant to help. Her words hung in the air like a challenge, and Marcus felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly brought him to his tears. This brave little girl was fighting for herself with the same courage her ancestors had shown in the face of overwhelming odds. Dr. Harrison stepped forward with a document of his own. Agent Crawford, I took the liberty of researching the legal requirements for Indian child placement. According to federal statute for 7B, a child may remain in a non-institutional setting if they are receiving adequate education, proper medical care, and appropriate moral instruction. I'm prepared to testify that Aiyana meets all these requirements. Furthermore, Sheriff Bradley added, Mr. Sullivan has filed a formal petition for adoption. Until that petition is resolved by the territorial court, you have no legal authority to remove the child. Crawford's face flushed red with anger. This is highly irregular. The Bureau will review this situation and take appropriate action. You do that, Marcus said quietly. But while you're reviewing, Aiyana stays home with her family. As the federal agents rode away in defeat, the community gathered around Marcus and Aiyana, offering support and sharing stories of how the young Apache girl had touched their lives. Aiyana moved among them like a small ambassador, her presence bringing out the best in everyone she met. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Aiyana leaned against Marcus's shoulder with the contentment of a child who knew she was truly loved. Marcus, she said softly, when I first came here, I thought my story was over. I thought all the beautiful things in my life had been destroyed. And now, Marcus asked, wrapping his arm around her small shoulders. Now I know that stories don't end, Aiyana replied, looking out at the horses grazing peacefully in the meadow, their braided manes catching the last light of day. They just change into new chapters. My grandmother's songs live on in the braids I make. My grandfather's wisdom lives on in the way I care for the horses. And my parents' love lives on in the family we've made together. Marcus felt tears slide down his cheeks as he kissed the top of Aiyana's head. You've taught me the same thing, little one. Love doesn't die when people die. It just finds new ways to grow. 3 months later, the territorial court officially approved Marcus's adoption petition, making Aiyana Sullivan his legal daughter. The ceremony was held at the ranch, with the entire community present to celebrate. Aiyana wore a beautiful dress that combined Apache traditional designs with frontier practicality, and her hair was braided with the same intricate patterns she used on the horses' manes. But the most moving moment came when Aiyana led Thunder to the center of the gathering, the stallion's mane decorated with braids that told the story of their journey together, patterns for loss and grief, for healing and hope, for the love that had transformed them both. This is Thunder, Aiyana announced to the crowd, her voice clear and strong. His mane tells the story of how broken hearts can heal when they're brave enough to trust again. Every braid is a reminder that beautiful things can grow from painful beginnings, and that families are made not just by blood, but by choice. As the celebration continued around them, Marcus watched his daughter demonstrate the traditional art of mane braiding to a group of fascinated children. She moved with the grace and confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was and where she belonged. The silent, broken child who had arrived 9 months ago was gone, replaced by a vibrant young woman who carried her heritage with pride, while embracing her new life with joy. She had found her voice again, and it was more beautiful than Marcus could have ever imagined. Thunder nickered softly, as if in agreement, his braided mane flowing like poetry in the evening breeze. In his dark eyes, Marcus saw the same contentment he felt in his own heart, the peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong, with exactly the family you were meant to have. Thank you for joining us on Aiyana and Marcus's incredible journey of healing and love. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories from the Old West. This tale proves that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we choose, and that love truly can heal even the deepest wounds. What other stories of hope and connection would you like to see? Let us know in the comments below.